Hey everyone, welcome to Sociastrology. Today we're going to take a look at the Mercury retrograde that we have taking place in Leo in July and August. So seeing how this Mercury retrograde is taking place in Leo, this should be impacting a lot of us quite personally. And so I wanted to go through it on a personal collective level primarily today, and then take it through sign by sign to see where this is showing up in all of our charts. And this Mercury retrograde also has a very interesting relationship with both Venus and Uranus during the broader period. And so I want to point that out as well. And I'll show you the charts of the beginning, middle, and end of this retrograde period as well. So to start with, here are some of our dates. Of course, we have our Mercury retrograde here when it goes retrograde. We did enter the shadow period, which is where it starts to go through the area of the sky where it's going to retrograde back over. We started that in June. So while the period of the 30th of June through the 17th of July might not feel so much like a Mercury retrograde period of time, this can point to some of what we're going to have to go back over during and then right after the retrograde. So the official retrograde period is starting on the 17th of July. We will have the Mercury cazimi, which means that the Sun and Mercury will be exactly conjunct. And that's happening at exactly 9 degrees of Leo, which is quite interesting. I'll go into that in a moment as well. That's happening on the last day of July. We have Mercury finally going direct on the 12th of August. And that'll be at 4 degrees and change. And then we have the end of the shadow period by the end of August here on the 25th. So even though I think that this Mercury retrograde is quite special and standing out in some particular ways, we do want to keep in mind, of course, all of the standard Mercury retrograde rules apply. So we typically do get communication issues, tech issues, internet outages, those moments where we just struggle to say the words that we're trying to say, those kinds of experiences, as well as when we just kind of can't think straight. So these misfiring synapses is how I always wind up perceiving of that. And then, of course, with the Mercury retrograde as well, we do typically see themes of reconsideration or returning to something, rethinking something, revisiting ideas, reconnecting with people, reconsidering even why we might not be in contact with people, and then also revisiting documents, conversations, things like this. So simply because this retrograde is in Leo, it will be speaking to our conceptions of self, so our personal selfhood, our sense of our role, our sense of our identity. So I think that for pretty much all of us, that's going to be a major theme, is thinking about who we are, how we conceive ourselves to be, what's personally significant to us, how we personally communicate, our own personal reasoning around different issues. And notice that right as Mercury is going retrograde this time, we're getting a really close sextile from Venus. And this is especially significant because Venus is in Gemini, which is a Mercury-ruled sign. So Mercury is over here doing its retrograde in Leo, but it's ruling Venus. And it's in a sextile to Venus. So we refer to that as reception. Not only is Mercury in a flowing, supportive connection with Venus, but it's also receiving Venus in its own home sign of Gemini. And so that's why I mentioned not only reconnecting with people, but probably considering why it is that we may have fallen out of connection with people as well. Those personal connections to other people, the way that we fit together with other people, whether or not certain connections have been really supportive of us, or perhaps even vice versa. These are the themes that I think we're going to go into this retrograde considering, and that are going to carry with us through a lot of this as well. Now, just as significant as that, we also have, this is the first Mercury retrograde with Uranus in Gemini. Uranus entered Gemini on the 7th of July. And this is pretty huge. This is something I've been dwelling on a bit when I've been talking about Uranus going into Gemini. Uranus takes about 84 years to go around the entire wheel of the zodiac, and it spends about 7 years in each sign. So when it enters a sign, it's a very big deal. And I've been mentioning how with all of the Mercury retrograde periods that we have coming up in the coming years with Uranus in Gemini, this is going to bring a particular kind of flavor to those Mercury retrograde periods where they're probably going to be a lot louder, more surprising, more unexpected. They may even feel more serendipitous, like rather than just misfiring synapses and not being able to talk, this could be more along the lines of Freudian slips that make you think about what was it that my mind was on that caused me to misspeak in this way? Is there something to that? What is that revealing to me? What insight is that providing to me about my thought process and about my conception of whatever it is that I'm communicating about? So in addition to those serendipitous insights that Uranus can bring us, like flashes of awareness on a specific matter, these jolts out of the blue that Uranus brings to us, it also does have a bit of a disruptive or a trickster quality to it. And so that aspect of a Mercury retrograde, which is already lightly an aspect that we wind up dealing with whenever Mercury goes retrograde as it is, that's really going to be highlighted. So we can expect a greater sense of disruption from these things. Now, I know that that sounds annoying, but to me, Uranus usually comes bearing gifts. It's usually disrupting things in order to bring something to our attention that was outside of the conventional thought process, especially when it's in Gemini. So those disruptions are more likely to have that enlightenment quality of Uranus in them and can even bring a revelatory nature to them where it's perceived as this kind of inventive thought that was outside of what we would typically conceive. I mean, hindsight during these Mercury retrograde periods is usually 2020. This is usually where we start to reconsider and then address some of the misconceptions that we may have had over the previous months. But this is then making that even sharper, much more poignant, much more of a sense of it being really right on the nose. So I would try and remain open to it. Again, I know it sounds annoying, but it usually does bring some really wonderful gifts with it as well. So what else is interesting about this retrograde is that we have the cazimi, which is when this is the exact middle of the retrograde cycle where Mercury meets up with the sun again. It winds up then falling back a bit and then starting to move forward again, and then they'll have a direct cazimi afterward. But this one is happening at exactly 9 degrees of Leo. And that stood out to me because of the fact that we had the last Mercury retrograde, which makes sense because it usually happens about a third of the zodiac away, around 9 degrees. But we did also have Venus go retrograde right around the same time and right around that same 9th degree of Aries. And this was in the April timeframe. So I can't help but wonder if some of the connection that we see standing out between Venus and Mercury this time around is also speaking to either some things that we were thinking about back in April or some experiences that we had with other people and with our sense of our connection with people, our role, whether we are fond of how our relationships are going, whether we feel like we're really connected to people. Either thoughts or events around that period of time with regard to all of these notions, I would not be surprised if that specifically is also something that's coming up this time around too. We may even feel around the time of the cazimi especially, that there are different aspects of our lives that are needing to be reprioritized around whether or not it's actually fulfilling to us or satisfactory to us. And I do apologize if you were able to hear my air conditioner in the background there for a bit. It is quite hot where I am, so I kind of cannot help it. But we have this square during the cazimi from the moon. And so there's this sense of something just kind of being in conflict where we're needing to sort out our sense of self as opposed to our sense of our connection with that which is around us. So these themes just keep coming up at each moment that I'm looking at this Mercury retrograde around what do we value about our connections to others, our connections even to society. And if we feel like that is falling short at all, how is it? Like, thinking it through of how we would ideally connect to others, especially given the way that the world is right now. I wouldn't be surprised if for almost all of us, we feel like that sense of connection to others is falling short in some way or another. But is there a way to potentially ameliorate that? And in a more ideal scenario than we're currently in, what contributions could we be making then? And even what efforts might we be able to make in order to connect with people a lot more authentically and even radically? So within our own communities, are there different ways of connecting than we have possibly even ever before? If there are communities that we'd like to see around us, is there any way that perhaps we could play a leading role in making that happen? Given the retrograde aspect of this Mercury, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of us are going to be thinking about how to recreate a sense of community that we once felt, and then maybe improve upon that. And then in the coming years, with the help of Uranus and Gemini, hopefully through this first Mercury retrograde process, having helped us to reconceive of this and imagine something that we can create over the coming years, how can we then, with the help of that, start taking steps to reconnect in those ways? Because that's a lot of what Uranus and Gemini is going to wind up bringing to us. And then additionally, just because I know that it's not super easy in the situation, the environment that we're in right now, where it feels like we're dealing with such serious concerns all the time, it can seem like the words or the tone that we use with other people is the least of our concerns. But again, especially with Uranus and Gemini, I think that that's going to be actually a lot more important. Certainly there will be sharper words and more shocking words said. But thinking about the impact of those things, thinking about the way that we connect with each other, that we communicate with each other, perhaps especially due to the influence of social media and how we've all noted how differently people communicate with each other through social media rather than in person, and possibly even how the way that we do communicate with each other now, even in real life, since we've had social media influencing the way that we communicate with each other, that might even be a lot rougher too, and a lot less constructive. So what kinds of words and tone are we using with each other? And what does that then wind up contributing to society? And I don't mean this in a remotely preachy way, because I think that all of us could probably do a bit better on this front. And again, given the weight of a lot of the issues that we're dealing with, it can seem like sharp words are deserved, and I wouldn't argue that. Or again, that this is the least of our concerns. But I think it does have a really huge impact on how it is that people feel like they can relate to each other or not, and how we may feel more alienated than we used to. So I think that's a lot of the questions that are going to be coming up for us throughout this period of time. And why this is so important, especially as the first Mercury retrograde that we're experiencing with Uranus and Gemini. This is certainly one of the first opening volleys, or one of the first pages that we're dealing with of that Uranus and Gemini era that we're stepping into. And so that's really being shaped around this period of time, this zeitgeist that we're coming into. And I'm going to keep preaching about it, but the way that we all handle this individually and then collectively, hopefully with a lot of intention, is going to have such a huge impact on how the coming several decades wind up playing out. And so I hope that we don't lose sight of that, and that we don't overlook the significance of this moment in shaping that going forward. So what kinds of roles do we want to personally play in reshaping the reality that we're all experiencing in these coming years? Because it's going to be reshaped regardless of what kind of a contribution we have to it. But we can guide that or direct that in certainly better or worse directions. Or we could try to guide it as little as possible personally. And I think one of the most significant things here is also being highlighted again by the fact that this Mercury retrograde is taking place in Leo, around how it is that we conceive of ourselves. And I wouldn't for a moment suggest that this can ever exist in a vacuum. my background is sociology, so the whole thing is that society shapes individuals and how individuals conceive of society and themselves, and has just such a huge impact. But we can definitely think that through and try to reshape ourselves and reshape those conceptions and redefine those conceptions for ourselves in a much healthier direction, again, with intentionality, especially if we're thinking through how some of those conceptions of ourselves have been constructed outside of ourselves and even outside of our own interests, whether that is the impact of individuals that we've known that have had a very strong impact on us, or society as a whole, and what is ostensibly valued in society. Do we really agree with the social values that we're living in, that are impacting us? If we don't, there is also this very important concept of agency, where yeah, it might be difficult at times, and yeah, it might feel like we're really stepping outside of the norms, but we can choose to step outside of those models that are preconceived and handed to us in order so that we may better fit into those things. And yes, there are some benefits to staying within that mold, but it's really important to remember that all of those molds are going to be changing in the coming years. So this would be a really wonderful moment to think through not just what impact we can have on those norms and on the social mold, broadly speaking, but at the very least, internally and with ourselves. And then hopefully we can encourage other people to do the same as well. And hopefully we can also grab onto some of the more lovely aspects of Leo, which is very affirming and very generous to other people, trying to build them up as well. And through that, trying to make society healthier individual by individual, such that we can have a much healthier concept of selfhood and community, much healthier values collectively. And like I was talking about with the impact that social media has had on our conceptions of self and connection and so forth, I would just throw out there that there is also a really wonderful warmth to Leo that I think is part of what we've lost in those connections in recent years, where we've been focusing so hard on just trying to get through the day, get through the week, get through the month, get through the year. And this can put us in a position where we're not really connecting authentically and warmly with other people. It's more a sense of, and I hate to say it, but like, what can I get out of this connection? And that kind of attitude is definitely beneficial to a specific concept of society and what purpose it serves. But I think that a lot of us are not really comfortable with that ultimately. And so maybe we can reinfuse a lot of our interactions with that warmth, that sense of human connection. And now this is the last phase. This is when Mercury goes direct. And I'm not quite sure why it's not showing up here, but it is in a sextile to Uranus. There's about 3 degrees between them, but it's pretty active. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's some really brilliant insights that wind up coming through at the end of this retrograde that really clarify a lot of what we've been trying to rethink throughout this whole process. It is also really wonderful, in my view, that this Mercury is going direct around August 12th, because that's also when we have this really lovely conjunction between Venus and Jupiter in Cancer. And these two are not really being interfered with by anything else that's going on in the chart. They're just connecting with each other. And this is another sense of that kind of nurturance and warmth and affirmation of others, and bringing the human and the emotion back into connection. So again, I think that this could be a really wonderful moment to realize again why it is that this has been such a significant, important thing to humanity for ages. Really wonderful ways that we can connect with other people, and what the benefit of that truly should be, which is a sense of safety, security, well-being, being taken care of, being able to take care of others, being able to shine in our own unique ways, being able to contribute our own ideas to our communities, and feeling supported. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of this is going to be precipitated by some complicated events that we wind up seeing in the world. Because just before that Mercury goes direct again, we do have the opposition between Mars in Libra, which is in detriment, opposite to Saturn in Aries, which is in its full. And they're conflicting with each other. These are not the nicest or most lovely of the energies that we have. And so there may be this sense of rejecting conflict, rejecting the sense that we need to be divided or pulled apart, which is precipitated by an event like that. And I do hate to say that. We'll go into this a little bit more around the August timeframe, because that's when that's going to wind up playing out. And it's going to be super important. This is one of the bigger aspects of the years, this opposition, but we'll dig into that more shortly. There's even this sense with this very interesting alignment that we have. Again, in my opinion, my program should have drawn a line here. I might have had my settings a little bit weird, but this configuration, some people refer to it as a castle. And notice what all is getting connected in here is the outer planets, Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, Saturn. We have Mars in the mix there, and then Mercury. And so this is highly active, but I do have to say, I think that this is more social. And what's interesting is that we have an unaspected sun, and then we have the Venus-Jupiter conjunction just kind of sitting there on its own. And so I almost feel like there's this energy to these configurations of, regardless of how complicated things look, regardless of what the social situation is, regardless of what our governments are doing, we should hopefully be able to find a place in ourselves and with those close around us where we can just be human and just experience life as it's meant to be experienced without needing to plug into all of the drama that's unfolding in the world. Even though it's going to be very important in the coming years, I think sometimes disconnecting, which that's another thing we may find ourselves doing on a personal level with this Mercury retrograde, is just kind of disconnecting from all of the noise and coming back to a sense of what's genuine and real. And that should help us then to come back to this place of understanding what it is that we have to contribute to each other and to ourselves. And so hopefully then reinvigorating that sense that we can shape the future, despite the sense that a lot of us have had recently of all of the complications that can come from trying to make those kinds of contributions. There will probably also be some really wonderful opportunities to connect with other people that just kind of remind us that a lot of people share these values. And that's a lot more important than all the noise that's going on. And the more that we can recognize it, the more active we can be around those matters. And hopefully then the more we can force the issue, for lack of a better term, that what we personally want and what we personally connect with is actually important, regardless of whether it's profitable or supported by the right people, who are generally few in number. But yeah, on the whole, I think that's a lot of what I want to talk about with the retrograde. We'll mention this again in the August horoscope and how it's connecting. And in just a moment, I'm going to take this through the different houses. And that is primarily for your rising sign. That way, the horoscope fits to the specific whole sign house that it will be going retrograde in your chart, but feel free to check it out for your sun sign or anything else that feels right for you. And before we go, I do want to say thank you so much for spending this time with me. I really appreciate it. And if you don't mind hitting the thumbs up button, I would also greatly appreciate that, as it helps to spread the video around, and perhaps even consider subscribing for future videos. I would love to have you here. And thank you so much as well to the members of the channel for your support. So thank you so much to Angel Niblock, Michelle Howell, JJ, Deborah Keel-Leavitt, Gary A., Startlingly True, Patrick McKenney, Jody, Anne Marie, C. Rezer, Peace Out, Maria Cyril Hyro, Rachel Windholtz, Lisa S., Aya, The Z-Man 1291, Lynn Newman, Long T. Standing, The Nelson Cat Maya, Connie D. Martino, Dali Gizi, Mango JT, B. Love, Grace, Psyche Lloyd, Noah, Aquarian Antiquarian, Speak Up Anthony, I think also of Lone Wolf Astrology, Susan Martin, Jonathan Mason, Chad Wiseman, Ezekiel David LaRosa, On the Road, and Adrian K. Thank you so much, and much love to you guys. And if you're interested in memberships, there's information in the description box below about how to join. And other than that, I hope that this retrograde treats us all very well, and do be good. All right, so for Aries, we have Mercury retrograde in Leo in your 5th house. So some of this impact regarding yourself, your role, your leadership, your attachments is taking place within the area of your life of your personal creativity, your expression, your hobbies, your interests, your creative projects. If you have children, this would speak to your children as well. And so there's this sense of renewing this idea of yourself with regard to your creative potential and your creative interests. You may really be rethinking some creative projects that you're working on. They may seem to run into some delays, or you may feel yourself come to something of a halt with those creative projects due to feeling the need to rethink what your purpose is with them and what you're doing with them. And that should ultimately be really helpful to revise those things, to reconsider them so that they feel like they are more so on the right track by the end of this retrograde. But it could be a little bit frustrating in the sense of timing. And of course, we could even see some communication issues around those creative projects, or with your romantic partners, or with children, with the people that you engage with your creative hobbies with. Additionally, some of these projects or romantic connections, they may wind up coming back around for review, and you may wind up reconnecting with some people for sure. You may wind up reconnecting with a hobby or an interest. And when it comes to those things, it can be difficult to say whether or not that's a thing that's coming around to stay, or if it's just trying to bring something to your attention or to remind you of something. But that is often a way that we wind up experiencing a Mercury retrograde in the 5th. Additionally, Mercury retrograde, because it can have to do with misunderstandings, some of this may be around ego attachments, or a sense of different people's expressions stepping on other people's toes. So you may witness that with others and experience that with others, or you may experience that as part of your own expression, that people are reacting to it in kind of a strange way. And so I would avoid any arguments around that, just because you're likely to then need to come back around and kind of have that conversation again, is usually how these things play out. And yeah, when it comes to those creative projects, passion projects, things like that, the whole thing that is meant to be rethought throughout this period of time is whether or not it's still exciting to you, whether or not it still feels personally meaningful, whether you're still able to really put your finger on what the meaning or purpose of it is in your life. And yeah, finally, I guess this is kind of similar to what I said up here, but just when it comes to like impulsive self-expression, the whole thing with the retrograde is that often we can need to then come back and correct for it when that Mercury winds up going direct. Sometimes our information can just be a little bit off. Sometimes we can misunderstand what someone else was saying, and therefore then start to speak or react to it before we fully understand what they meant. And so I would definitely recommend just taking some time thinking things through before reacting to something or posting about something, because you may need to come back around and clear up some of the facts there. But yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Aries. So I hope that this transit treats you super well, and thank you so much for being here. All right, so for Taurus rising, we have Mercury retrograde in Leo in your 4th house of your family, your home, your roots. And so there could definitely be some drama going on with family or around home issues. There could be some very strong misunderstandings and people just kind of combating back and forth about ego-driven issues, I hate to say, but this is usually around a sense of needing to communicate oneself strongly and needing to basically express oneself and possibly feeling unheard or unappreciated. And that can then stir up some of those matters of ego within the family. So that's something to keep in mind, that people are likely to just be a little bit more reactive around this period of time. Now, also, this can have impacts on your home with regard to real estate or property. So typically, it's a good idea to try and put some of those things off until after the retrograde has passed. And that is because usually things need to then be revised after the fact. So there could be some delays. There could be needing to revise an agreement or reconsidering an agreement after a few weeks. So if you're able to put off some of those decisions, it wouldn't be a bad idea to just try to avoid some of those complications. This may well also be really speaking to emotional stuff from your childhood or from your family. This could speak to conditioning or just how you were brought up to express yourself. And so if that was a complication, or if it is somehow being presented to you around this period of time, that there may have been some things in that you might not have recognized before, this could be bringing some of those things up. Now, if you're super aware of some complications there, this would be a decent time to just think those things through, to process that a little bit more. This Mercury retrograde is going to enable you to look at that from many different directions. And so it might wind up helping you to come to some greater clarity even than you already have. And you may even wind up then in contact with some family members that you have fallen out of connection with. And that can wind up bringing up some matters of memories. You may be thinking quite a bit about family members, whether or not you're in contact with them anymore. And you may be tempted to communicate with people like that. And there's no hard and fast rules when it comes to reaching out to people when Mercury is in retrograde. Just do keep in mind, there can be some unexpected outcomes to that, especially considering we have Uranus in Gemini, which is being ruled by this Mercury, which is retrograde. That's neither a positive nor a negative thing, but it's just more likely to go kind of unexpected. And then, when it comes to other contractual things or matters that you need to communicate a lot around when it comes to your house, so home repairs and things like that, I would just, if you're going to do that, expect delays. Try to make sure that you're as clear as you possibly can be in your communications. Try and get stuff in writing if you possibly can. And then when it comes to electronics in your home as well, that could also wind up becoming an annoyance, a complication. There could be little bugs or things like that, especially, for instance, if you have a smart home or something like that. You could just wind up running into some bugs. Now, one thing that I guess could be construed as a silver lining when it comes to a Mercury retrograde on that front is that usually these issues do wind up resolving themselves. If you run into an issue where you just don't have any patience for it, it might wind up clearing itself up after some time. So just trying to exercise as much patience as you can with things that are going on with your family and home throughout this period of time would be great. But I think that's pretty much what I have for you, Taurus. So I hope that this transit treats you super well, and thank you so much for being here. All right, so for Gemini, we have Mercury retrograde in Leo in your third house of communications, the people, places, things around you, your neighborhood, siblings, extended family. We can even see travel take place in this house. So for you, unfortunately, it's extra likely that there's going to be some communication breakdowns. That could be specific to peers, siblings, neighbors. It could be to do with agreements or exchanges, things like this. It could be around technologies for sure. But honestly, it could be kind of across the board. This is a house of communication, so it could be with basically anyone. This can even wind up contributing to delays and miscommunications around travel. So that's something to keep in mind if you're going to be traveling during this period of time, to just try and make sure that you're communicating as much as you possibly can, get as much as you can in writing, and then just try to plan for some delays. I personally put off some big travel of mine until after this Mercury winds up going direct. So if that's a possibility for you, that might also be the way to go. Also, unfortunately, for you, especially around tech issues, there could be some hiccups, there could be some bugs, there could be some glitches. I mean, we're already in the shadow of this, and the program that I'm recording this through wound up, it had an update, so I updated it, and then it stopped working, so I had to purge the program, reinstall it. Things like that can wind up coming up. Now, fortunately, with the Mercury retrograde, one of the minor silver linings is that some of these issues that it winds up bringing up, they kind of naturally resolve themselves given some time. So as patient as you can be with technologies, with communications, with miscommunications, that's always pretty much the way to go when we're dealing with a Mercury retrograde. It's usually not as serious as it might feel like it is in the moment. But yeah, double checking everything, backing up your files, making sure that you're hitting save on things, possibly saving things to the cloud in addition to your hard drive, just in case if something's extra serious or extra important. It might even be worth, if you're the type of person who usually rejects a receipt, it might be worth accepting more receipts and things like that, because this is also the house of exchange. So purchases and things like that, you may wind up just changing your mind about something like that. And then if you can't get a digital receipt due to a tech issue or something, having that, different copies of that might be wise too. Now, you naturally have a third house Leo area here. So I'm sure that you've learned to work with the strong communication skills that comes with, and how sometimes it can come off a little bit stronger than you intend. There's a little bit more of a risk of that with Mercury going retrograde in this house. So just try to make sure that what you're saying isn't going to be misconstrued as being a lot more boastful or a lot more ego-driven than you're actually intending for it to come off, because there can be just tone issues that wind up backfiring. So also on social media, things like that, just kind of trying to be extra careful that you're basically just communicating as you're intending to. That's where the issue comes in. It's not so much, oh, be extra nice or, oh, be extra strong or anything like that. It's just a matter of, is this going to come off the way that I'm expecting for it to come off? And of course, when we're dealing with text or social media, things like that, there can be even extra risk of things being misconstrued or tone not coming through. Now, there could be messages, documents, things like that you are either going back through and you just so happen to be going back through them, and maybe you'll realize, oh, I didn't even think about this in a week or whatever, when you find yourself going back through documents for some reason. But you may find yourself doing that for sure, and reflecting on times previous, reflecting on the people that you had around you, or connections that you had, or trips that you took, experiences that you had. And it may even wind up encouraging you to reach out to someone from the past. And so there's no hard and fast rule when it comes to that with the Mercury retrograde. It might be great. It might not wind up turning into much of anything. For you, you have Uranus now in your first house if you're reading this for your rising sign. And so certainly behaviors like that, reaching out unexpectedly, I would expect the unexpected from you. So that may also wind up being something that you find yourself doing. But that Uranus there could even surprise you. So someone may actually wind up reaching out to you as well. Now, one thing that can be quite helpful to do with the Mercury retrograde is it's going to give you a different type of perspective on anything that you've written, on any ideas that you've put out there. So if you have any potential editing coming up, this could be a really great time to try and slot that in, rather than if you're getting a creative block or a writer's block or something like that. Trying to push forward with the Mercury retrograde can be pretty frustrating, but this should be the type of thing that would help with editing, specifically going back over something and cleaning it up. But yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Gemini. So I hope that this transit treats you super well, and thank you so much for being here. All right, so for Cancer, we have Mercury in Leo retrograde in your second house of your sense of security, stability, finances, income, matters of your values and self-worth. And so you could have some push and pull. You could have some weird delays or reversals, back and forth, basically, when it comes to something financial throughout this time. So one thing I would say, you may actually wind up reconsidering a purchase that you make. So I was just talking to Gemini about saving their receipts. I might want to throw that out for you as well, to just make sure that you're in a position to return any big purchases that you might be making throughout this period of time, because you might wind up rethinking it. And you may even want to hold off on any big purchases or any financial commitments until after the retrograde is over, because better to just not even start something than buy something that you're going to wind up wanting to return. That's just a hassle, you know? So if you are able to put things like that off, it might be wise just to save yourself the hassle later. But yeah, like I said, there might be some delays or things like that when it comes to finances. Now, one thing that I will say, a silver lining with a Mercury retrograde, it's usually not a matter of a denial. So if, for instance, there's a paycheck holdup or something like that, it might be good to not, if you can, and I hate to say this, to not overreact, basically, because you might wind up communicating differently than you were expecting to. It might come out a lot stronger than you're intending for it to. And so as patient as you can be with any sort of delays or miscommunications about financial matters, the better. And I would just try to get everything, any sort of commitments, anything like that, in writing, and make sure that there's solid communication on that front. You may even be reconsidering or rethinking some values of yours and how it is that you express those, how it is that you engage with those in your day-to-day life. You may even be reconsidering or revising an income stream or something like this. And those things can wind up overlapping, where you might question whether a specific income stream or something along those lines is worth what it is that you're putting into it. And so there might be even rethinking a main job. You might be considering getting a different kind of income or leaving a job, basically. I definitely wouldn't recommend doing that right now. Just, there's so many indicators here for you, Cancer. You also, in addition to this Mercury retrograde, you also have Saturn and Neptune retrograde in your 10th. So I feel absolutely obliged to throw it out there that you might wind up deciding differently later. So the less initiatory moves that you can make during this time, especially rashly, I think the better. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it, but if you're going to make a move like that, I would definitely make sure that you're 100% clear on it and that you already have everything sorted out, because I just would want for you to avoid any potential regrets in the future, much as I hate throwing that word out there. That said, if you're rethinking these things around this period of time, thinking that through would be really a wonderful way to spend the coming weeks and even months, to really think about what it is that you're wanting to experience when it comes to the way that you earn money and the way that you work and your role, your position, your reputation, your legacy, and how you're wanting for all of that to flow together. Because there are so many potentially frustrating but genuinely wonderful energies here for you to really put some highly effective thought into that, and then get you ready for the Saturn-Neptune conjunction that will be taking place direct in your 10th house in February. Now, also, this can speak to belongings or possessions in the second house. You may be rethinking some of those things. You may be choosing to purge and get rid of a lot of stuff because maybe you are deciding that it's not worth it to have the things because it's causing clutter and you'd rather have the money, and you'd rather have the freed up space. This could be like even clearing out a storage unit or something like that that's costing you money. But things may also then need to be repaired or corrected, basically, throughout this period of time, too. And you may even wind up deciding to have a different relationship with your money. So when it comes to spending, when it comes to self-indulgence, when it comes to how it is that you provide yourself with a sense of security and stability and emotional and material comfort and security, I guess would be the word for that. The way that we can sometimes derive emotional security from financial security and from self-indulgence and things like this. That may be something that you have your mind on quite a bit, and whether or not the way that you're going about that is genuinely satisfying to you, or whether or not that is in alignment with a specific plan that you have. And maybe you can figure out a solution to change your attitudes or change your behavior with regard to spending if you feel like there's a plan of yours with Mercury retrograde that you're wanting to enact, but maybe you feel like if you were to spend a little bit differently or even earn a little bit differently if you're wanting to go part-time or something like this, all of those considerations with regard to the plans that you're trying to make for the future for yourself, and especially for the future of your sense of career or reputation, given the Saturn-Neptune conjunction that's up in your 10th house. Rethinking how it is that you value material goods could be super helpful throughout this period of time as well. But I think that's pretty much what I have for you, Cancer. So I hope that this transit treats you super well, and thank you so much for being here. All right, so for Leo, we have Mercury retrograde in Leo in your first house. And so this is really fundamentally personal for you. This is about you, how you present yourself, how you connect with others, how you express yourself, how you carry yourself, as well as your motivations. And so you're likely to be rethinking a lot of this throughout this period of time, rethinking your identity, rethinking how it is that you connect with other people and whether it's truly authentic or whether this is kind of coming up for review to get you back to a place that feels a lot more authentic than maybe it has recently. You may even be rethinking your image or how you are projecting yourself. One thing I would say is that during the retrograde, it might be wise to hold off before you make any major changes to your image or how you are presenting yourself, because often these can be a different perspective on what it is that we're doing, which can be really helpful. But we can wind up deciding after it goes direct again, after Mercury goes direct, to do something differently than we expected that we would under the retrograde. So, for instance, it's usually not considered the best timing for like a major new revision to how you do your hair or whatever when you're in the Mercury retrograde in your first period of time. And there can even then be misunderstandings with all of this. So for instance, again, if you were to go and see a hairdresser or something like this, there could be misunderstandings or miscommunication about what it is that you're actually even wanting. But that can also then play out in really any given area of your life, just feeling kind of misunderstood throughout the retrograde. This is really to clarify to you how it is that you're expressing yourself, how it is that you're presenting your motivations, your intention to the world. And so it's a really excellent and helpful kind of a transit, but it can be a little bit frustrating in the moment because there can be so many misunderstandings. So when it comes to a new look, changing up a brand, a major launch, personal launch, that I would, if you can, hold off until Mercury goes direct, because it's likely that it's going to need to be revised, or there can be major delays, or there can be a misunderstanding. And so if you do hold off, you can basically just avoid a lot of potential headaches. You may even find yourself, like I was saying, like connecting back to, I know I used different words, I can't remember what they were, but like connecting back to a sense of an authentic self that you may feel like you've come away from, and basically rethinking that and rethinking what was authentic about that. What can I reconnect to along those lines? And what of that may not have been the most useful? And did I pick up any sort of conditioning from a previous experience or a previous version of yourself that just isn't worth it to carry with you anymore? And you may have a sense of lacking closure with something that's deeply personal. And that could be totally within you, or it could be with someone else. And there may be a sense of really needing that sense of closure. Now, I can't say for sure one way or the other how that would wind up going, if it would really wind up being satisfying if you were to reach out to someone for something like that. But if that's something that you genuinely feel like you need around this time and there's not much cost to it, then it might be really worth seeking something like that out. But yeah, this is really just all about your sense of self-image, your confidence in yourself, your sense of authenticity, your sense of self-expression, and how you carry yourself. And so there's a lot of reflection on that and this really deep renewal of your sense of self. And that can then bring you back into connection with your own style of leadership and a greater confidence in your ability to lead others and your ability to come across the way that you are intending to. This can also then bring you back to a sense of clear motivations with yourself, why it is that you do what it is that you do, why it is that you feel like your purpose is what it is, and how it is that you can best go about achieving that is what a lot of this is going to wind up clarifying for you over the broader retrograde. But yeah, I think that's pretty much what I have for you, Leo. So I hope that this transit treats you super well, and thank you so much for being here. For Virgo, we have Mercury in Leo retrograde in your 12th house. So this is the place of your subconscious. It can be a place where we feel like we have some less control. It can also go under the radar, as well as speaking to matters beyond the veil. So spiritual concerns, matters of spiritual healing, those also wind up showing up in this 12th house. So one thing is that for you, this is going to be more internalized than for a lot of people. We do see some settings that have to do a little bit with other people, but for the most part, this is happening very much internally. And one could probably say it's mostly going to be happening within the context of the mind. And so there could be just increased weird emotional, psychological stuff going on. Now, the good thing is that it'll be processing some of that, but in the moment, it might feel a little bit weird. So it might feel like anxiety. You could definitely have some sleep disruptions for sure. I know I, for one, had some very weird sleep stuff going on when Uranus was wrapping up its transit in Taurus, which was the very last degrees of my 12th house. And so, yeah, definitely you can get some weird experiences with sleep. You could have some unusual dreams that have a stronger impact than usual. And then there could also be some subconscious triggers that wind up coming up as well. So internal dialogue could be kind of triggering. You could also just encounter things in the world that you can sense has a stronger impact on you than it usually would. And the reason for that, if you want to run with it, if you want to see where that's coming from, that would be great to just look at and try and figure out where the root of that is, basically, so that you can reconceive of that, so that you can have a little bit more control of it going forward. But yeah, a lot of this is going to feel like it's happening internally. Also, I always mention like misfiring synapses and things like that, because I definitely get that personally from Mercury retrogrades a lot of like, wait, where did that Where did that thought come from? Or like, why was I not capable of completing that thought in the normal way? That could definitely be a thing that's going on for you internally as well. Freudian slips, I would certainly imagine, are going to be a thing in the coming weeks here for you. Additionally, with retrogrades, we can wind up encountering things from the past again. They can come up, or we can just be kind of thinking about them again. And so past spiritual, emotional, even psychological concerns, conditioning from youth or really at any point in your life, just things that we tend to put aside and not deal with right away because it can be complicated to deal with that, plus living in the world. Those things may wind up arising and just kind of presenting themselves to you. Or again, this can be something that's triggering in a sense from the outside, where you're encountering maybe a difficulty or a challenge that someone's dealing with around you, and it reminds you of the fact that that was once an issue for you. And maybe it's not so much anymore. Maybe there's still a bit of residue to deal with there, but it's coming up again just to consider, to think about, maybe to offer yourself some congratulations if you haven't really thought about the fact that maybe this is something that you've already overcome. Now, in terms of dealing with other people, this tends to be an area where sometimes there can be things going on with people that we're not aware of. And so there could be some private miscommunications. There could be some matters where there is a miscommunication, but for some reason or another, you're feeling like it shouldn't be addressed, or that it shouldn't be shared publicly, or it shouldn't really be discussed. And so if that's something that winds up coming up, that might also be worth kind of reconsidering, because it's, to me, usually better to just kind of get things out in the open and just address things straightforwardly. And if there's something that you're really feeling like is going on between you and someone else, and you feel like there's no one to talk to about that, that might also be worth just kind of thinking about a little extra during this time, around whether or not maybe what's going on is actually quite healthy or not. This can also be an area of secrets specifically. So when we get a Mercury retrograde, sometimes the way I conceive of it is like information kind of getting jostled. And so there can just be weird experiences where secrets or things that weren't really spoken about just kind of come to the fore in strange ways. So one thing I would definitely recommend is to try to steer pretty clear of gossip, because of the fact that with a placement that is acting in your 12th house, sometimes there can be some weird effects that wind up coming from it. So if you're trying to keep secrets, it might be more difficult to keep those throughout this broader Mercury going retrograde and then going direct period of time. So even if it seems like something is going under the radar right now, it might not so much once Mercury goes direct. Additionally, if you don't really understand someone's motives, it might just be worth being a little extra cautious in situations like that. But yeah, overall, really the best way to utilize this transit would be to do this kind of reflection, possibly meditation if that's something that you're into, either especially significant therapy sessions. I mean, I wouldn't say that you need to go into therapy because this is just a Mercury retrograde, but you may also be able to more effectively psychoanalyze yourself throughout this period of time as well. And this can then give you a different vantage point on that. That's one thing with the Mercury retrograde, is you tend to get multiple different views of the same kind of situation. And so if there's something that you're wanting to work on, it might be great to just set your intention on just thinking about it at multiple different times throughout this coming several weeks, because it's likely that you're going to have different types of perceptions or perspectives of it. And that can be really effective for some sense of a cognitive breakthrough around what's going on in your own psyche, and then healing through all of that. So yeah, I think that's pretty much what I have for you, Virgo. So I hope that this transit treats you super well, and thank you so much for being here. All right, so for Libra, we have Mercury in Leo retrograde in your 11th house of friendship, allies, benefactors, hopes, dreams, aspirations also wind up showing up in this house, as well as group affiliations and associations like this. So this is likely to be playing out within those kinds of friendship, social bubbles. And with Leo there and a Mercury retrograde, there can definitely be some drama, some gossip, some misunderstandings, things like that arising in this place. So that could be kind of frustrating. I would personally suggest being as patient as you possibly can with things like that. There could even be some weird little secrets that wind up coming out, or some information that was overlooked that winds up arising. And then whenever you're dealing with, say, colleagues or friends or whatever, misunderstandings are also very likely in this area, as well as miscommunication. So trying to make sure that if there is a misunderstanding, that it's hopefully just being treated as that and not being looked into more than what's actually there. I mean, sometimes we can get some deceptive stuff with the Mercury retrograde, but it's much more likely that it's just a miscommunication. We can also then see social connections, as in social media, that is in this place. So I would just be, again, a little bit more patient, maybe take your time a bit more with what it is that you're posting, because, again, it's much more likely that it's going to be misunderstood, or that there's going to be a miscommunication during this period of time than usual. Another thing with retrogrades generally is that there can be a reconnection to the past. So you might be thinking about an old friend a lot more and wonder if you should reach out. I don't feel that there are any hard and fast rules when it comes to that. This isn't necessarily a good or a bad indication as to how that would go, but someone may also wind up reaching out to you somewhat unexpectedly, and possibly even more unexpectedly than usual. It might be someone you just 100% would not expect to reach out at this point, due to the fact that Uranus is also ruled by this Mercury. And then, I mean, layering onto that, that could wind up being someone from college, someone from overseas, certainly, given the fact that Uranus is in that 9th house. So yeah, I feel like we've already kind of covered the tech and networking stuff, networking also falling into that, like benefactors, friendships, colleagues kind of thing. Just all of that. Those group events could wind up seeing delays or little issues coming up. So it might be great to plan a little extra time or double check things more than usual. But finally, when it comes to this kind of hopes, dreams, aspirations aspect of the 11th house, this is pretty cool for that. It's not at all a bad transit for that. It's actually very helpful in terms of getting clear. Now, it might feel kind of weird, even already, because we're already in the shadow. It might feel kind of weird coming into this retrograde. You may be wondering whether you still want to do X, Y, or Z, and that might feel strange. I would kind of go with it. I wouldn't make any sharp decisions along those lines if I were to be giving advice about that kind of a thing. I would just kind of try to let this play out without getting too anxious about it, because it's much more likely that what's actually going on is that you're just getting a different perspective on what it is that you're running with. Again, this is quote unquote just a Mercury retrograde. It's not the hugest deal in the world, but it can give us a different perspective on things because of the fact that that Mercury is going through that same area of the sky, which is represented by your 11th house. It's going forward, it's slowing down, stopping, going backward over that same area, stopping, slowing down, and then going forward over it again. And so it's just basically giving you a different perspective on what it is that you're trying to go after. And what I would like highest tier expect to wind up playing out there would be that you're coming to some better understanding of how to go about or how to plan for specific goals of yours, rather than that you're just scrapping it. And oftentimes those kinds of perspectives that we can get from things is through questioning. And so it's basically what I'm getting at here is like, You don't have to scrap it just because you're questioning it. You might be questioning it because that's the best way or the fastest way to get you to rethink something in a really fundamental way. But yeah, I think that's pretty much what I have for you, Libra. So I hope that this transit treats you super well. And thank you so much for being here. All right, so for Scorpio, we have Mercury in Leo retrograde in your 10th house. And this is the place of your career, your public standing, your position, your role, your legacy, what it is that you are known for creating in the world, basically. So straightforwardly, this can definitely play out as some delays or miscommunications, misunderstandings in your career, perhaps especially when it comes to your position. So these matters of recognition, promotions, you may feel like that's somehow going overlooked, or that there's just kind of something weird going on with that, where it seems to be less clear or less straightforward, or it may look like someone's going back on something. So especially if you are expecting a promotion or some recognition or something like this, what I would recommend along these lines is to just not stress too much if there is a delay. A delay is kind of called for by a Mercury in retrograde. So I would not expect from a Mercury retrograde that someone will permanently go back on something that they have offered or something that you're expecting, but they may be dealing with some confusion along those lines as well. They may need to sort out some details or something like this. It's likely that there's just more that's going on with the situation rather than that there's some sort of active deception or something like that going on. So I'd be as patient as possible for best results with this if there's anything like that going on. Now, if you are a boss or an authority figure within your working life, if you are self-employed, something like this could feel like you are not being understood in terms of your communication. And that can also be kind of frustrating. But again, if you're getting weird results from what it is that you are trying to direct people to do or what it is that you're trying to put out there, it's likely just this transit. It's a period of time. It's kind of frustrating, I know. But there may even be a way in which your tone is coming across differently than you are thinking that it is, or differently than it typically does, that people are perceiving this a bit differently. So again, I would just kind of preach patience with that. But if you have a boss or an authority figure that you're dealing with, they may be experiencing that and you may be on the receiving end, or there may be some miscommunication between you and an authority figure. So if someone is coming across weird, if someone has a weird attitude or something like this, it's much more likely that it's a temporary period of miscommunication. Unless that's just how they are, then it might be becoming a little bit more frustrating throughout this period of time. Now, this could even have you rethinking or going back through some goals or ambitions or roles, positions that you have been seeking or that you're already in. And one thing I would say with that, again, it's going to be in the theme of patience, but I wouldn't jump to make a huge decision throughout this period of time, because often with a Mercury retrograde, we do wind up changing our minds again once that Mercury goes direct again. So I would just kind of give that some time to cook if you are rethinking something and wanting to make a change. But on the plus side, when it comes to this, what can be helpful about a Mercury retrograde is it can give you multiple different perspectives on something. So if you have, for instance, been lacking some motivation or lacking some sense of purpose, something along those lines, this can bring that back in by just taking different perspectives, providing to you generally different perspectives on what it is that you're doing or what it is that you're seeking. It could even give you different types of strategies around when to push, when to pull back, when to be patient, when to be assertive. That can be very helpful for you going forward. But it does require some level of patience because there could be delays or just a lack of clarity throughout this process at different points too. Additionally, when it comes to like showing up in the world and enacting and playing your role in the world, it might be really wise to double check your statements, the words that you're using, the tone that you're using, even the timing of certain things throughout this period of time. If you're feeling rushed, that might be a really ideal time to kind of pull back a little bit, because there could be, again, miscommunication. But if you're doing this in a very public way, it could just kind of become more annoying, because there might then be more to have to deal with or more to have to clear up later. And yeah, those professional moves, like I was mentioning, just kind of being patient with that, thinking that through, giving that some time to cook throughout the coming weeks before really making those moves. Also thinking about your leadership style, which is quite important since you have Leo in the 10th house generally. For you, leadership, personal leadership, how you carry yourself, this is all very important to your achievements basically in life. And so reflecting on that, thinking that through, possibly internalizing some of that, like going within to reconceive of this and to think about how is it that you're genuinely wanting to show up on a personal level and then publicly as well. How does that come off to others? Is your leadership style very effective? Could it potentially be more effective? If you were to make some little tweaks, if you were to rethink some of the motivation behind that. Additionally, don't shoot the messenger, but is there any way that ego comes into play with this for you? It does for all of us, but because this is happening in this place for you during this time, it might be wise to think that through and wonder if there might be any personal attachments to role or position or status that might be less than helpful. And then just kind of tweak those, and you might get better results from that then going forward. But yeah, I think that's pretty much what I have for you, Scorpio. So I hope that this transit treats you super well. And thank you so much for being here. All right, so for Sagittarius, we have Mercury in Leo retrograde in your 9th house. And the 9th house has to do with faraway places, so we can see travel here. It also has to do with higher learning, your philosophy, your worldview, your spiritual perspectives. We can also see publishing here and different aspects of education, learning, things like this. So if you are traveling during this time already, if you already have that planned basically, then I would just recommend double checking everything because there's more likely to be delays or misunderstandings. And so if you're going overseas, make sure, insurance stuff, make sure about your visa stuff, double check your bookings. Trying to plan for delays, of course, with layovers, that can always be kind of complicated. I, for one, just straightforwardly decided that I was going to hold off on my travel until after this retrograde. That might also be wise, but I realize it's kind of around the corner at this point. So if you are traveling, those are just some good things to keep in mind. Also, if you're driving, like if you're taking a road trip or something like that, just try to be extra aware of your surroundings while you're driving, because you could be less attentive than usual, and it might not be that obvious until something kind of happens that winds up causing a delay. Also, if you are a student or there are any legal matters going on, there could be some miscommunication, some misunderstandings along those lines. It might be difficult to focus if you are a student, so I know that's frustrating. It is just a temporary period of time. You may even find yourself like rethinking the path of your study. And I wouldn't make any big decisions quite yet. I wouldn't make any impulsive decisions. I would just wait this out and see what the perspective is that you have, say, going into September around this, because it's likely that you will be more clear about what you're doing at that point, but it's likely that you'll come to temporary, different, divergent plans or perspectives along the way. So it's cooking right now. So I would give it some time. Again, with legal stuff, you'll want to make sure that you're double checking everything, that there aren't any weird kind of miscommunications going on, that there aren't any decisions that are going to have to be gone back over. A decision might be switched later on. So just kind of something to keep in mind too. If you're in publishing, or for instance, if you have a blog, if you are a social media person at all, there could be some strange effects here where there could be some delays, there could be some tech issues, there could be some miscommunications that you're publishing. I wouldn't say if you're publishing on a regular basis to not publish anything during this time, but there could be a delay in response to that. So it could be something that, for instance, if you have a blog or whatever, you might put out an article and then not get the full response to it until later. Also editing. I would be kind of double editing if you're going to be publishing. Now, also with retrogrades, there can be things from the past that wind up arising again. So in this house, this could be people that you've known from overseas or from other places. This could be teachers, mentors, students, people who have contributed a lot to your philosophy. They may be arising again, or you might be thinking those connections through again. And you may even want to wind up reaching out. And to me, there's not really a specific rule when it comes to that. Mercury retrograde doesn't indicate whether or not that's going to go well, but it can be an urge that you feel. So I would say that that is a value judgment as to whether you want to go ahead with that. If you're at all anxious about it, you can always just kind of wait until the transit passes and then see how you feel about it at that point too. Now, additionally, with this being the place of your perspective, your worldview, your philosophy, that could also be undergoing some shifting, some kind of changes around the edges of that. So I would try and stay as open as you possibly can to different kinds of perspectives, to information that's new that you're receiving, because this is one of the best ways that this transit can play out. This is one of the gifts of a Mercury retrograde period of time, is that you can look at something from all of these different perspectives of Mercury going direct over this area, Mercury going retrograde over this area, and then direct again with that whole process then in mind. And so it can really clarify things a lot. If there's anything that you're kind of unclear about, it might be really wonderful to actually set intentions to just kind of come back lightly to that concept and see how you're feeling at different times throughout the coming weeks. It's likely that that will kind of self-clarify for you, basically. You may even then wind up, just by setting an intention along those lines, encountering very helpful information too that expands your mind, that expands your perspective. And that can then cause you to really rethink, to reevaluate the perspective that you have held for a time. And you may even, with the messages that you've been disseminating, that's part of that publishing that also winds up coming here, is the ninth house is the place where we disseminate the knowledge, the ideas, the perspectives that we have. And so you may even be rethinking, bringing it down even just to the tone that you use or the way that you approach disseminating your perspective, even the mediums that you use to convey that message. You may be deciding that you want to tap into even a different social media network, because I think those can also show up here, since they're all platforms for publishing your ideas, basically. So you may be changing some of those perspectives that you have, but you may also be just shifting how it is that you're going about discussing those things. You may even then be getting different perspectives on spiritual truths and spiritual philosophies that you carry as well. But yeah, I think that's pretty much what I have for you, Sagittarius. So I hope that this transit treats you super well. And thank you so much for being here. All right, so for Capricorn, we have Mercury in Leo retrograde in your 8th house. And this house can have to do with your entanglements with other people. So that can play out in a lot of different ways. We can, of course, see debts and financial entanglements, shared resources, other people's resources that you are kind of tied to in some way. But it can also have to do with vulnerability, intimacy, trust, dependency. Power dynamics show up in this place quite a bit as well as the psychological dynamics of other people, the people that are around you, basically. And so One thing is just kind of straightforwardly, those financial entanglements could become confusing, unclear. There could be miscommunications. There could be delays involving those things. There could be, if you are partnered and your partner has an income, there could be delays with an income. And usually these are just going to be temporary, and it will just be a delay. It won't be necessarily a denial with a Mercury retrograde, but that could just be kind of frustrating. So I would recommend being as patient as you can just during these specific weeks. And there could be a real need across a couple different areas to just think things through. So when it comes to matters of intimacy, trust, dependencies, when it comes to entanglements, when it comes to power dynamics, when it comes to whether you might potentially place some significance on the security of others to give you a sense of security, things like that. Whether you look to others for affirmation and to shore up your sense of security in yourself. These things could be coming up for a major rethink throughout this period of time. So when it comes to specific other relationships, of course, communication can be quite helpful, but I would expect some miscommunication, some misunderstanding. So this can be a bit of a testy area where miscommunications are really taken to heart. The extent to which you can remain as detached from that as you can throughout this time and just try to be as clear-headed as you can about that would be wise, but it might even be best to just kind of think these things through on your own and consider whether your close connections are satisfying or fulfilling, or whether you have a sense of genuine trust with people, and just kind of think that through personally for now, and then possibly address it in a few weeks when this Mercury goes direct, if you're wanting to avoid some misunderstandings. Sometimes we can lack trust in the 8th house too. And so you may have a sense of, if there is a miscommunication, wondering whether or not that was intentional. It could be for sure, but I would expect specifically from a transit like this that it's more likely that it is just genuinely a miscommunication. This can also give you some really, one of the gifts of this, I think, would be offering you more perspective and insights on the psychological dynamics of the people that are around you. And so those power dynamics, but then also what's going on within other people. So if there's been a complicated relationship or something like this, you might be, especially if you kind of set an intention going into this, on becoming clearer yourself about what's going on in those connections and what's going on with those people. You may wind up encountering that information from different places and through different types of insights, different types of observations of behavior, and things like that, that just wind up clarifying those power dynamics that you're dealing with, because those can often go under the radar and be very unclear, especially if we do tend to subconsciously place some part of our security in affirmation from other people or in our connections to other people. There can be subtle dynamics that are going on that are really difficult to see, especially when it comes to questions around like the motivations of other people, things like that. And I know a lot of this is kind of like dense, weighty stuff, but it should be helping you, this retrograde, to become a lot more clear along those lines, such that you're able to look at if there's any baggage there, if there's anything that is unwelcome there that may have been having a subtle impact or a subtle effect on you for a while. Any questions along the lines of, why is it that I just, no matter how much I try, there's just a level on which I don't really trust this person, things like that. It's likely that you'll be getting different divergent types of perspectives on that throughout this period of time, such that by the end of a few weeks, several weeks time here, you should be a lot more clear about what's actually going on there. And that can be really wonderful and really freeing, and can ultimately wind up helping immensely with a sense of trust, even if that trust is placed in your own sense of being able to depend on your own perspective of what's going on with the people around you. This can also be a place where contracts show up. So those entanglements that we can create with other people or businesses, banks, whatever it may be. And so if there are any contracts coming up to sign, if you can delay that, I would recommend that kind of a thing. If you can't delay it, just make sure that you're going through it with as fine-tooth a comb as you possibly can to make sure that there's not something that you're overlooking, because that's the kind of thing that's a little bit more common to have happen when you have a Mercury retrograde. It's just overlooking something. If you're in a position to, this might even be one of the better times to get an expert to look over a contract. Another thing I would recommend when it comes to contracts and things like this is get stuff in writing, get stuff in like a way that it can be proved later. Because if there are miscommunications and like a verbal agreement, that can be really difficult to prove later on if something winds up arising. Now, additionally, when it comes to the internal aspect of this for you, again, to me, it's really about building the trust that you're able to quote unquote place in other people, because it's actually based on your own trust in your ability to perceive of where people are coming from. But there may be some past emotional baggage that is tied into how it is that relationships play out for you and how it is that connections have played out for you. Possibly even this being the house of inheritance. I also feel often like what can show up here is the emotional inheritance or the psychological inheritance that we can pick up on from our family as well. And so that may even be something that you're just thinking through, that you're reflecting on, that you're trying to gain some perspective on, so that, again, you can liberate yourself from some of that going forward and then have more trust of yourself and others in this place. But yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Capricorn. So I hope that this transit treats you super well. And thank you so much for being here. So for Aquarius, we have Mercury in Leo retrograde in your 7th house. And the 7th house can be pretty straightforward. This has to do with your one-on-one connections with other people. So romantic partners, business partners can show up here, as well as others that you have those close one-on-one connections with. And so there could be, for sure, some misunderstandings, some miscommunication, some confusion around intentions or expectations or those connections that you're having throughout this period of time. And again, that it doesn't just have to be romantic partners here. It can be those other close one-on-one connections. And so in order to hopefully avoid some misalignment throughout this period of time, just trying to be as clear as one possibly can, trying to be as patient as one can with communication and with misunderstandings, I think would be the best way to go about that. Additionally, retrogrades tend to bring people back into the picture, or it can remind you of the past. And so with Mercury retrograde in your 7th house, this could definitely indicate some surprising communication from past partners. I would expect that this would lean more toward romantic partners or creative partners from the past, or people that you engaged with in projects or hobbies or something like this, because there is also that unexpected quality that's being emphasized by the fact that this Mercury in your 7th house is ruling Uranus, which is now transiting through your 5th house. So we are getting some of those 5th house themes in the mix here too, and especially with any of the surprises that are coming in. So there may be someone coming back up again. 5th and 7th, it might not be the worst thing to entertain, but it would certainly be pretty unexpected, and that could be for different types of reasons. So maybe there's closure, maybe there's a reconsideration, maybe there's a rekindling of something, maybe there is a project partner or a hobby partner, a friend that is coming back into your life that's pulling you back into an interest or a hobby that you had or a project that you were pursuing at some point. But there may also be an internal aspect of that where if there were certain relationship dynamics with someone from the past that's arising again, this may even be asking you to rethink just those dynamics. What are your expectations with other people? Do you hold yourself to the same regard as others in a connection? If you're at all unclear about that, it might be really wonderful to utilize this transit to really think that through and get different types of perspectives on that. Because that retrograde, it's going to give you multiple different ways to look at those things. And so helping then to reassess those relationship needs, how it is that you engage with relationships, how it is that you express affection, what your expectations are within relationships, even going broader, what some of your ideals around why it is that you connect with other people, what motivates you to connect with other people. For you, with that Leo rising, it might be that you love to connect with exciting, bold, fun people. And there may be a consideration along those lines of, are those always the best people for you? Also, I wouldn't say don't connect with people or don't start something under a Mercury retrograde, but the thing is, in terms of a relationship or like a new commitment, basically. But keeping in mind that when we are dealing with a Mercury retrograde, there can be misunderstandings, there can be confusion, there can be that question around whether you're aligned or not. That could take extra time to figure out. There could also be mismatched expectations. So again, being as clear as you can about that would be great. Perhaps even with yourself before you try to broach a topic like that with other people. I think often we can be very unclear with ourselves about what it is that we're expecting from relationships. There could also then be some delays or some little bumps along the way with a connection that starts under a Mercury retrograde. So that is just kind of worth keeping in mind. It might even be very worth, if you meet someone around this time and you're interested, taking your time and letting that develop slowly such that you would actually wind up starting a deeper connection with someone after that retrograde. You could then get some really wonderful perspective and insights on them and each other's expectations before you jump into something. But yeah, additionally with Leo in this place, your conversations, your communications, and some of the misunderstandings might come in would be around dramatic reactions to things or attached reactions to things that might be a little bit less familiar for you with Aquarius, where you're able to be a little bit more detached maybe than some of the people that you connect with. But there may be some of that winds up arising throughout this period of time. And again, I would just say being as patient as you can in situations like that would probably be the best way to go about that. You may even be rethinking some of the connections that you have and even considering letting some of those go. I would say with the Mercury retrograde, often we can make a decision and then decide to change that decision. So again, that's something where I would say it might be best to let it cook for a bit and then make a decision like that in a few weeks after this Mercury goes direct again. But yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Aquarius. So yeah, I hope that this transit treats you super well. And thank you so much for being here. All right, so finally, last but not least, for Pisces, we have Mercury in Leo retrograde in your 6th house. Now, I hate to say this might be one of the more annoying ones because it's kind of on the nose. And so when it comes to your plans, when it comes to your routine, your everyday stuff, tasks, trying to get stuff done, that can become more confusing. That's where this Mercury retrograde is playing out. So there could be major miscommunications around plans and like what you're doing to try to get things done, especially with other people. So with coworkers, with employees, there could be balls getting dropped due to a lack of clarity around really what's going on, or even a lack of clarity as to how to go about something. I would also expect that, this is a planet of mind. This is a house of health as well. And so you may be just kind of questioning, like, why can't I think straight? I would wait until the retrograde is over to really get too stressed about that. It's probably just the, tricksy Mercury retrograde that's playing out in that place. This can also be like work tech stuff, daily, like routine tech stuff can wind up coming into some issues. There could be some delays due to that. If you're in training for something, if you're trying to learn a skill, this could wind up making that a little bit more difficult as well, particularly when it comes to focus. So also when you're at work, you might just have a little bit more difficulty focusing on the task at hand or clearly understanding things like you usually would. Also, emails, communication, work communication, stuff like that could become more complicated as well. So yeah, I would recommend double checking your appointments, like the routine kind of stuff. Health stuff might be really worth just making sure that you're really clear about what's going on with all of that. I also consider sixth house doctors to be showing up in this place. So if they're confused, it might be great to get a second opinion. And it might even be wise, if it's not something that's urgent or whatnot, it might even be wise to give it some time and try to make an appointment for after the Mercury retrograde. That way, one, there's less likely to be a bunch of weird waiting time or delays, but doctors that you're interacting with are also likely to be a lot more clear on what's actually going on with you. You could even, with this kind of a transit, have difficulty articulating what's going on or articulating what your concern is. This is also one of the places where pets can show up. So they may also be a source of miscommunication or confusion for you. They may be like kind of on one or just kind of confusing to be dealing with. So they may be kind of going through something, some confusion or weird behavior. They might be misunderstanding you and reacting to that. So that is something to keep in mind, that pets might be acting a little bit differently than usual, and hopefully just kind of being a little bit more patient with them around this time. But yeah, generally, like what's great about a Mercury retrograde is that it can give you a lot more perspective on something. Yeah, it's confusing, but that's because our mind is kind of going one direction and then it goes back over it in a different way, and then finally again forward, and we can get a lot of clarity around whatever it's touching. And so for you with this in your sixth house, especially if you want to put some intention on this from the outset, that can be a really wonderful thing to say. I want to look at my routine, my habits, the expectations that I have for myself out of my day, and I want to see if maybe I can make that more efficient or just more like human, because a lot of us place expectations upon ourselves that we can't really maintain every day, and then feel bad on those days where we don't live up to that. So if that's something that you're really wanting to rethink, it might be great to check in early, think that through, check back in a week, think that through, check back in a week. And you should be able to, through that process, get different types of perspectives on how it is that you can go about your routine to make it more enlivening, more spirited with Leo here, more exciting, and just feel like something that is potentially even less draining. One thing to keep in mind with strong Pisces placements is that phases and waves are definitely something that you function within. So what is your rhythm? What's your cycle when it comes to how much it is that you're able to handle? And are you able to bake in a sensitivity to your own kind of rhythmic cycles into your routine? Can you plan days off? Like if you are kind of working independently, maybe you can consider the fact that there are certain days that you're just going to need to have be like flexi days. So if you're able to work ahead, and then maybe if one of those just kind of spontaneously arises, then you're good to go. You can just kind of take that day off as it comes. But things like that, just basically making that routine of yours more human for you to function within. So, habits also showing up in this place. You may be reconsidering or stepping back from some habits. You may be actively trying to work on or think through solutions to certain habits that you're trying to drop, or you might be trying to incentivize or like gamify certain habits that you're trying to pick up. And I would totally recommend this period of time to be doing some of that work. Is it likely that you're just going to immediately happen upon the solution? I mean, maybe, but more likely it'll be a developing process throughout these few weeks where you'll get more and more clear on how to create the habits that you're wanting and how to drop some that maybe have been troublesome or complicating for you recently. But yeah, I think that's a lot of what I have for you. It's speaking to both routine and health. So one of the things I would just most recommend overarching with all of this is, what is the health level of your routine for you? Does it work for you? Does it make you feel good? Does it make you feel like it's efficient? Does it make you feel like you're spinning your wheels? Those are some of the things where you can utilize this transit as something of a gift of this period of time to think that through from different types of perspectives and glean little insights from the different periods of time throughout this cycle of this few weeks, to where you should be able to construct a pretty solid way of going forward when it comes to your routine and your health, your daily life, and to enliven that a bit, because that's something that's really important for you with Leo in this place, is that your routine isn't just boring and draining, so coming back to that, I think is a lot of the gift of this transit. So yeah, I hope that it treats you super well, Pisces, and thank you so much for being here.